He was just 16 when he vanished, and when his mother begged police for help, they laughed in her face. 2 weeks later, that same officer would be eating his words. The desk officer, a broad-shouldered veteran named Daniels, barely looked at the photo she handed him. He leaned back in his chair, smirk tugging at his lips, and said, "Teenagers sneak out. He's probably just out with friends. He'll turn up." Linda's voice cracked as she tried to explain. Tyler wasn't like that. He wasn't rebellious. He wasn't a runner. He was a shy, bookish kid who lived for library trips and tinkering with old computers in the garage. He called her if he was running 10 minutes late. For him to vanish without a word was unthinkable. But Daniels only chuckled, scribbling half-hearted notes onto a clipboard. "Maybe he just needed a break from Mom," he said casually, as though a missing boy was nothing more than an overdue library book. Linda's chest tightened. Fear and fury surged together. In that moment, she understood something chilling. She wasn't just fighting to find her son. She would have to fight the very people sworn to protect him. To understand why Linda refused to be dismissed, you have to know who she was. Linda Myers was a single mother who had built her life on sacrifice. She worked 2 jobs, mornings at the diner, nights cleaning offices, just to keep food on the table and the lights on in their small rented home. She wasn't wealthy, but she was determined. Every dollar she earned went toward giving Tyler a life better than her own. And Tyler was worth every sacrifice. 16 years old, he was quiet, thoughtful, a boy who didn't quite fit in with the loud kids who filled the high school halls. He spent afternoons in the library, devouring books on history, coding, and mechanics. In the garage, he tinkered with old circuit boards and second-hand computers, dreaming of building one of his own from scratch. He wasn't the type to party. He wasn't the type to vanish. His predictability was his defining trait. And that's why Linda knew, with every fiber of her being, that something was horribly wrong. On the night he disappeared, he had gone to a study group at the library. He texted his mother at 8:12 p.m., heading home soon. That was the last message she ever received. By 9 o'clock, panic was clawing at her chest. By midnight, she was standing in front of Officer Daniels, being mocked for caring too much. The next morning, Linda called Tyler's friends. One by one, they confirmed the same thing. They had seen him leave the library. He had said goodnight, tightened his backpack straps, and walked toward the parking lot. None of them saw him after that. But one detail stood out. Several students remembered a black car parked near the library. Some recalled a man leaning against it, offering rides. One boy admitted the man had approached him too, but he declined. Another swore he saw Tyler standing near the car, hesitant before disappearing into the night. Linda brought this information to the station. Daniels waved it off. "Teen gossip," he muttered. "Don't read too much into it." Each dismissal drove the knife deeper. But Linda was not a woman who gave up. She began her own search. Flyers went up across Brookhaven. Tyler's smiling face stared from lampposts, grocery store bulletin boards, and diner windows. Linda's friends rallied around her, knocking on doors, canvassing neighborhoods, asking if anyone had seen the boy with the shy smile and oversized backpack. Students from Tyler's school joined too, handing out flyers and retracing his steps from the library to the road. They combed fields, searched wooded trails, peered into abandoned lots. Every night, after finishing her shift at the diner, Linda drove through empty streets, windows rolled down, calling her son's name into the dark. Her voice cracked with desperation. Each time, the silence that answered back seemed heavier, crueler. The community began to notice. Local news ran a story with the headline, "Mother begs for help finding missing teen." Reporters filmed Linda standing in her front yard, clutching Tyler's photo. Her voice trembled as she pleaded, "Tyler, if you can hear this, I'm looking for you. I won't stop until I find you." Her words broke hearts across the county. But inside the police station, Daniels remained unmoved. Days turned into weeks. Leads dried up. And still, Linda refused to quit. Then, 2 weeks after Tyler vanished, joggers stumbled upon something strange in the woods just outside town. Near the creek bed, half hidden beneath damp leaves, was a backpack. He unzipped it. Inside were textbooks, a half-empty water bottle, and a student ID card. The name read Tyler Myers. The jogger called police immediately. For the first time, the station erupted into action. Officers sealed off the woods. Search dogs were brought in. Flashlights cut through the trees as boots pounded the ground. Near the creek, investigators found more. Footprints pressed deep into the mud. Tire tracks carved into the soil. And there, buried beneath debris, lay a phone. Tyler's phone. When they powered it on, they found his last message. It was to his mother. "On my way home. Be there soon." But he never came home. At the edge of the crime scene, Linda stood trembling, tears running down her face. She watched as officers, the same ones who mocked her, now scrambled in shame, finally admitting what she had known all along. Detectives traced the tire marks to an old sedan registered to a man named Richard Harlan. Harlan had lived in Brookhaven for decades, but he was not well liked. Years earlier, he had worked as a school janitor. Parents whispered about him, uneasy with the way his eyes lingered on children. He was eventually fired for inappropriate behavior, though the details were quietly buried. Since then, he had lived in a dilapidated house on the edge of town, surviving on odd jobs and disability checks. When police arrived, they found his car hidden under a tarp, mud still clinging to the tires. Inside his house, the air was stale, heavy with dust and rot. And what they found inside chilled them to their core. Photographs, dozens of them. Young boys, all around Tyler's age. Some were candid shots, taken from a distance, at parks outside schools and grocery store aisles. Others were more deliberate, posed, smiling, and among them was a fresh photo. Tyler's school portrait, clipped neatly and placed in a folder marked with his name. The evidence was damning. Richard Harlan was arrested on the spot. At first, Harlan denied everything. He sneered at the detectives, claiming the photos were nothing more than a hobby. But under pressure, the cracks began to show. Confronted with the backpack, the phone, the tire tracks, he faltered. Finally, he broke. He admitted to luring Tyler with the promise of a ride. He confessed to keeping him captive in a shed deep in the woods. He described how Tyler had escaped one night, running into the darkness, dropping his belongings in the chaos. But he hadn't finished the job. Tyler was still alive. Police raced to the shed, guided by Harlan's directions. Inside, they found proof of captivity. A stained mattress on the floor, rope, empty food wrappers. But in the corner, trembling, gaunt, and terrified was Tyler. Alive. The boy's eyes widened as the door swung open. For a split second, fear flashed across his face, until he saw his mother behind the officers, her hands covering her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Mom," he whispered. Linda rushed forward, dropping to her knees and wrapping her arms around him. She sobbed uncontrollably, clutching him as though she would never let go. After 2 weeks of torment, her son was back. The town erupted. Tyler's rescue made headlines across the state. Crowds gathered outside the police station, demanding accountability. How had the department ignored the warnings? How had they laughed in a mother's face? Reporters demanded answers. Officer Daniels, once smug and dismissive, was nowhere to be found. His arrogance had nearly cost a life. His laughter had turned to silence. Richard Harlan faced a litany of charges: kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and possession of exploitative material. He was denied bail and faced the rest of his life behind bars. But for Linda, the true victory wasn't the trial. It was the moment she held her son again. Tyler's recovery was not easy. He had lost weight. He struggled with nightmares, waking in the middle of the night, convinced he was still trapped in that shed. Counselors worked with him gently, guiding him through trauma. Friends and teachers surrounded him with support, determined to remind him that he was not broken. Months later, Tyler returned to school. He was quieter, more reserved, but his resilience shone through. He joined a computer club, poured his energy into rebuilding machines, and slowly, piece by piece, began to rebuild himself. Linda never left his side. The story left Brookhaven forever changed. For the police department, it was a stain that could never be erased. Daniels faced an internal review, his career in ruins. For Linda, It was proof of something she had always known. A mother's instinct is not to be mocked, but to be trusted. She stood outside the courthouse on the day of Harlan's sentencing, Tyler's hand in hers. Her voice was steady, filled with quiet strength, as she spoke to reporters. I begged them to listen. They laughed, but I didn't stop. That's the only reason my son is alive today. This story is a chilling reminder. When someone disappears, every second matters. Dismissing fear as overreaction can be deadly. Linda Myers was told to stop worrying, told to go home. But her persistence saved her son's life. And for the officer who laughed in her face, his arrogance will forever be remembered not as confidence, but as failure. Because in the end, truth has a way of silencing laughter. And sometimes, the difference between life and death is one voice refusing to be ignored. This was Trace Crime Files. Subscribe for more stories where truth is stranger than fiction, and justice is never as simple as it seems.